I'm April Rozzo, registered dietitian with Florida Cancer Specialists, and Angie Mathewson is also a registered dietitian with Florida Cancer Specialists. So she will be moderating for me today, chatting with me, talking about the different benefits and nutrients in this recipe. And she'll also be keeping an eye on the chat box and Q&A boxes, so that if anyone has any questions as we go through, please feel free to just type them in one of those boxes. And that way we can try to answer your questions as best we can. So today we are making turmeric black pepper chicken with asparagus for lots of different reasons.
Yes, so many reasons.
So many reasons. We are going to talk about all of those reasons as we are cooking, but I want to go ahead and get started with the asparagus. We have a little bit of prep work, a little bit of chopping to do. So I want to go ahead and dive into that, and then we can talk about all the goodness of this recipe. So if you have asparagus, if you have fresh asparagus, I like to trim just the really thick ends off. They're edible, but they tend to be very fibrous, very chewy. They don't get tender like the rest of the stalk does. You can do it a couple of different ways. You can snap it and discard the end, or I am going to try to be fancy and do this whole bunch and just trim it. I've got them all kind of lined up, and I'm just going to trim the ends off. It's quicker.
That is way faster. Yeah. The snapping it is way fun, especially if you have a mini helper like I do.
The snapping is so fun. It feels very rewarding for some reason. But it's much quicker to just chop them. And then we're just going to take a few at a time so that I kind of don't make a mess. And we're just going to cut them into little bite-sized pieces. Two reasons: they'll cook faster in the stir fry, and they'll also, you won't have to cut them. You'll be able to just eat the whole meal as is without having to cut up your asparagus in the process. So we're just going to cut those up. So while we are doing this, asparagus, as much as I love asparagus, has a very short season. It has a very short growing season. It's usually very expensive in the grocery store, and you know when it's in season because all of a sudden it's half the price of what it normally is. So for about
a half price bunch in my cart right now.
I got a whole other bunch in the fridge because it was BOGO at Publix. And that's how you know it's in season. And so for about 2 or 3 weeks, I eat as much asparagus as I possibly can, because then the price goes back up and I'm not going to buy it again for another year. And it is in season right now. The timing of this teaching kitchen was perfect so that we can make some delicious fresh asparagus. The other reason that I like asparagus so much is how packed full of nutrients it is. So it's a great source of fiber, and we all know we need lots of fiber for gut health and regularity. But it also has a lot of iron and potassium, vitamin K, vitamin A. It just has so much goodness in it for us to only eat it 2 weeks out of the year. So we're going to take advantage of that.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier that particular type of fiber is one of those prebiotics.
So it feeds the healthy probiotics, the healthy bacteria in your gut, and maintains that healthy gut microbiome. If you guys have read Angie's newsletters, or if you've joined my webinars, you have heard us both talk about how important that gut microbiome is for your. We're still learning everything that a healthy gut microbiome does. But the microbiome just refers to the organisms in your gut, the healthy bacteria that are in your gut. And we want as much of that as we can. So that is done. The asparagus is all chopped. We're gonna set that aside for a second. We are gonna mix, so there's a little bit of a sauce that goes with this chicken and turmeric, that's the honey. So we've got 3 tablespoons of honey. I'm gonna add to it black pepper. We're gonna talk about why the black pepper is so important in a second. But about 3/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper goes in there. A teaspoon, half a teaspoon of salt. We're gonna add to that. Salt is not bad. You can see that we're gonna use salt in this recipe. It's just that most of us have too much salt in our diet. So it's really about scaling back, just using a little bit to enhance other flavors, and then putting a lot of spices and flavors in your food so that you don't have to rely on salt. So that was just half a teaspoon. And then we're gonna add about 1/4 cup of water, just to make it a kind of a mixable consistency. Got a little whisk here, and I'm just gonna stir that up, break up the honey a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, when you cook with a little pinch of salt, like you had there, the heat, like bring something to the table with nothing on it, and then you'd have to salt it at the table.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so now the honey is loosened up, it's all mixed in together. We'll give it another stir before we add it in, because a lot of times the honey can settle back to the bottom. So we'll kind of whisk that up again. But that's the only thing that's in here: honey, black pepper, salt, some water. Okay, so we're just gonna set that aside for now. And then we have a couple tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and we are gonna add the star of the show, besides the asparagus, the turmeric, the ground turmeric. It is 1.5 teaspoons of ground turmeric. And then I've also got in the bowl, you guys can see it in there, another teaspoon of salt. And again, this is just to add, just to enhance the flavor of the turmeric. That's really what salt does. It enhances all those other flavors. So we've got the 1.5 teaspoons of turmeric, a teaspoon of salt. We're gonna mix that into the flour. And this is what we're gonna coat the chicken with. Okay.
Yum.
So the reason one of the reasons that I like this recipe so much is because we are oncology dietitians. We work in cancer. And on the daily, I am asked by people about taking turmeric supplements for their anti-cancer properties, right? And I always tell people, most of the studies show that it's probably safe, but why not cook with it? It has so much flavor. I would so much rather you, because there's so much about some of these herbs and spices, particularly turmeric, that we don't know as far as the mechanism, how it works. So is there something about in its whole spice form mixed with other herbs and spices that make it more beneficial? Because a lot of the benefits that we're seeing in lab studies, Petri dishes, are not translating necessarily to human studies yet, as far as reaping those big benefits. And so I would much rather you get it in your food, enjoy it in your cooking. It adds more flavor than taking another pill or another capsule. So while we are doing that, I have some chicken breast. The recipe calls for chicken thighs. That's fine. I'm using chicken breast because that's what I have. Whether you use thighs or breasts, make sure that you trim the excess fat off. I have boneless, skinless, but they still have a little bit of fat, which I already trimmed off. But usually around the bottom, around the top, there's some extra layers of fat that I like to trim off. We don't need that in this recipe. And same with chicken thighs, there's usually a lot of extra fat when you buy those chicken thighs. So just make sure that you're trimming that off. And what we're gonna do, I'm gonna slice these lengthwise, and then I'm gonna go ahead and cut them into like little nugget size, little bite-sized pieces. So turmeric, we go back to talking about turmeric. There is a lot of evidence for its anti-inflammatory benefits. And a lot of the reported cancer benefits, the anti-cancer benefits or the cancer fighting benefits, are because of the anti-inflammatory action. And so a lot of people will use turmeric as a supplement for arthritis, for joint aches and pains, because it's supposed to help lessen the inflammatory process. Something important to note about turmeric, it's not very available in the body. When you take turmeric supplements or you put turmeric in your food, your body can't absorb very much of it. Angie, you wrote a paper on it with some specific percentages and amounts. Are you there? Oh, you're frozen.
I did, and I will, yeah, that's right. And I am, can you hear me?
Yes, you're better. I think we're having some connectivity issues with Angie.
Okay. So the curcumin.
We are having some connectivity issues with Angie, unless I'm the only one that can't hear her. So I'll go ahead and fill in. Angie, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Currently, I can. Yeah.
Okay. So turmeric contains 3% as the bioactive component of turmeric.
3%.
Yes.
And I think you started to say curcumin. So a lot of people, they interchange the words curcumin and turmeric as the same thing. And in actuality, curcumin is the compound, it's the phytochemical in turmeric that really provides the anti-inflammatory property, the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant benefits. So it's the curcumin in the turmeric. That's what also gives it its pretty yellow color. But that is essentially what's giving us the health benefits. And so curcumin is what is not very bioavailable in the body. It doesn't get absorbed very well.
Right. And those lab studies are using these high doses of concentrated curcumin.
Yeah. Now, what we have found is that black pepper, or the piperine, is that how you pronounce it?
Piperine.
Yep. The piperine, the compound in the black pepper, increases the absorption. It increases the bioavailability from the turmeric, which is another reason that I like this recipe so much, is that it combines the turmeric and the black pepper. So we're getting all kinds of benefits. We're getting the health benefits from the asparagus. We're getting the benefits from the turmeric. We're increasing the availability with the pepper. It's a one-stop shop, y'all, this recipe. And it's super fast. The most time that this recipe takes is what we're doing right now. Breaking down the asparagus, breaking down the chicken. Once that's done, this recipe whips up so fast, you won't even believe it. So we've got some chicken. It's all broken up, little nugget, bite-sized pieces. You can see it in there, yes. So we are gonna take this flour turmeric mixture, and I'm gonna dump my chicken in there. Just get it all in. This is about a pound of chicken. It might be slightly more than a pound, the package that I bought, but it's about a pound of chicken. And so I'm just gonna use a fork, and I am gonna mix it so that all of the chicken gets coated nice and evenly. And actually, while we're doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and heat up this pan, medium heat. Medium, there we go. Tablespoon of vegetable oil. You can use vegetable oil, grapeseed oil, coconut oil, whatever your preference. So we're just going to get that heating up.
Which kind of oil are you
So today I'm using vegetable
using,
oil.
April?
Vegetable oil, that's what I pulled. I keep it in the fridge because I don't use a ton of it and I don't want it to go bad. So I'm using vegetable oil. I also keep a bottle of grapeseed oil right at the stove. Grapeseed oil has a nice high smoke point, so it's good for stir fries. And it doesn't really have much of a flavor of its own. So I use it a lot when I'm cooking stuff in the skillet. I have lots of oils. I have olive oil, I have grapeseed oil, I have sesame oil for when I'm cooking something Asian. I have my vegetable oil.
I do keep sesame oil. Yeah, sesame oil adds great depth of flavor.
So much flavor in that sesame oil. Okay, so you can see there's very little excess flour. I've got all my chicken really well coated. You can see that in there. And I'm starting to smell the turmeric. Okay. My pan's nice and heated up. My pan's nice and hot here. Heated up like I didn't go to school. All right, I can hear the oil starting to crackle a little bit, so I know we're good. So the chicken, we're gonna toss this right in the pan, and it's gonna cook for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side. Make sure it's not too hot. I don't want it to splatter everywhere. Just like that. So we're gonna get all this in here. And just go ahead and spread it around in your skillet so that we make sure it's all getting cooked, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and wash my hands since I was handling raw chicken. So this, like I said, it's gonna cook 2 to 3 minutes on each side. And then we're gonna add that, we're gonna add the asparagus and the honey mixture, let it cook for a few minutes longer. And then it's gonna be ready. How great is that?
Now you are just going to eat this as is. You're not going to put it on rice for your own lunch.
I am not, mainly because I don't particularly need the carbs. I don't need the extra calories or the carbs today. Because my family makes Easter bread and I'm eating Easter bread and I don't need any extra rice or pasta.
Well, and I think, you know, it's a stir fry, right? So it seems like, oh gosh, we should have it on rice, but we don't have to. And we also don't have to substitute anything for it. I think if I were making it, you know, for 4 people, I would probably serve it with a rice, but just fill it out.
You know, I would cook it. I do some basmati rice, like some brown basmati rice or some wild rice with the different grains. And I would cook that and serve this right on top. Like a half cup of the rice would be a nice portion. Yeah.
And you know, I haven't done this, but I bet those buckwheat noodles are like those kind of little.
I've never tried those, but they would be awesome as well. Yeah. I mean, you could do something like egg noodles if you wanted to, but then we're losing a lot of the nutrient value.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the buckwheat noodles, couscous, which doesn't take long to cook at all.
No.
Wild
like
rice.
5 seconds.
Yeah. So any of those would make a great addition to make this a little bit more balanced. Like I said, for me today, because I have all that bread in my house, I don't need to add any extra carbs.
Yeah, you choose your carbs. Yeah, actually on Easter, my mom made pie and everybody went to get pie. And I said, I'd rather have seconds of the potatoes. So that's what I did.
There you go. Whatever's your favorite, right?
Yeah.
It's not about an elimination game. It's just about pick your preference, pick your favorite.
Yeah.
Right? What are your priorities?
Yeah. And April, you were saying about the turmeric that we don't know exactly the mechanism of its benefit. And we don't, and it's really interesting. And one of the mechanisms might be via the gut microbiome, so that it could be changing the permeability of our GI tracts and decreasing inflammation that way. So
absolutely.
yeah, we've got a powerhouse of a recipe here.
Right? Just another reason to really make sure you're getting lots of fruits and vegetables in your diet for those prebiotics, the fiber benefits, so that we maintain that healthy gut. Because we are learning so much about everything that it does. You know, and asparagus.
That color is really gorgeous.
Right?
Yes.
And I'm just using the tongs because we want to make sure that it's cooked on both sides. So I'm just using the tongs to turn all my pieces, make sure they get cooked. You know, the asparagus is another powerhouse because for people who don't eat a lot of meat, because we tell people don't eat a lot of red meat, it's not good for you in large quantities. But meat is mostly where most of us get iron from, right? So the asparagus, great source of iron. Now, just like the turmeric is not super bioavailable, it doesn't absorb all that much. When you get iron from a plant-based food, not an animal source, it doesn't absorb very well either. So then we need some vitamin C to pair with it, and the vitamin C actually increases the absorption of that iron. And guess what else asparagus has in
it? This is truly a unicorn. I think this is a unicorn recipe.
Asparagus has some vitamin C along with the iron. You can see it's getting nice and cooked. We're just going to leave it in a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to throw the asparagus in with it. So initially, when we put the asparagus in, we're only going to let it cook for a minute or two, just to start cooking, to start getting tender. And then we're going to go ahead and add that honey mixture to it, and it'll cook for a few more minutes with the honey, the pepper, and everything else. And we're going to time this perfectly to be finished at 12:30. So, yeah. You can also use turmeric in dips. So I was at a conference once, and they made a yogurt-based vegetable dip. So instead of using sour cream or cream cheese, they used plain Greek yogurt, and they had turmeric in it. And I'm sure they mixed a few other things. So I have to pull the recipe back up. But turmeric was the primary seasoning for the yogurt, and that's what they served as a dip for their veggie sticks, their carrots and broccoli and celery, and it was delicious. It was that turmeric just added some extra flavor to the yogurt. You can add it to something like that. You can add it into curries. That's where really turmeric was used for, was in curries. That's what gave curry its yellow color. You can mix it into grains. So if you're cooking a couscous or a bulgur wheat or something, you can mix you can mix turmeric into that. And I think, Angie, one of your newsletters had golden milk or a golden milk latte.
Yeah, which is like a latte. Yeah. And the recipe that I included is for like a salad dressing that you make with tahini and turmeric. And you know, it's hearty enough. It doesn't just go on salads. It could go on like a green bowl, like you mentioned. And you know, you were talking about curry, and I do just want to make sure everybody knows to buy turmeric for this recipe, not a pre-blended curry mix.
Thank you. That is very important. I have both. I have curry powder, but yes, that is a very different flavor than just turmeric.
Yeah. Yeah, and they can vary a lot in what else they have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for a long time, I did not I was one of those people. I didn't realize there was a difference between curry powder and turmeric. And I bought curry powder and it was too strong for me. I didn't love it. And so I just assumed that I didn't like turmeric. And then, I tried this recipe out just with the turmeric, the ground turmeric, and I actually love turmeric. It's something else in that curry powder that is too strong for me. So,
hey, April,
yeah.
How much flour did you put in the chicken coating?
2 tablespoons of flour with a teaspoon and a half of turmeric, and then a teaspoon of salt. It doesn't take a lot because we just want that light coating on the chicken. All right, so that's been in for a couple minutes. I'm going to go ahead and add the honey black pepper mixture. And it's going to cook for a couple more minutes in this. Ooh, you guys, I can smell the turmeric, that kind of golden hint from the turmeric. And now I'm smelling the sweetness from the honey mixed in. We're just going to go ahead and stir this all together. So what's going to happen as it cooks for a couple more minutes is that honey mixture is going to thicken a little bit. The water will evaporate and the mixture will get thick so that it coats the asparagus and the chicken and doesn't just pool at the bottom of your plate, because we don't want to lose any of that saucy goodness, right? Now here's what we're going to do at the end. I'm going to let this simmer for a little bit to let that sauce thicken up. And I have got a teaspoon of rice vinegar. So when this is done, I'm going to turn the heat off and we're going to throw in that teaspoon of rice vinegar. The recipe calls for rice vinegar or soy sauce. But what we're looking for is, and I don't need the soy sauce, there's enough sodium in here, there's enough flavor in here that I don't feel like soy sauce is really necessary, because to me, the soy sauce overpowers the turmeric flavor and the honey flavor. So the rice vinegar, pour in that little splash of rice vinegar, gives it a little bit of acid, and it just helps brighten up all the flavors. And that's why we're using it.
And I think you said you're going to turn the heat off before you add the vinegar. Yeah. So yeah, make sure you do that. Otherwise it all like burns off right away.
Right. And if you were cooking on the stove top, you would just move it off the heat before you threw in the rice vinegar. So you can see, hopefully you can see, there's less sauce on the bottom of the skillet right now. It's starting to thicken. We're just going to cook it for a few more minutes. It will also thicken a little bit as it cools. Once we take it off the heat and it cools, that sauce will thicken up a little bit as well. But I'm just tossing everything around. The asparagus is getting really bright green. That color is starting to come out, which is telling me it's just about done. And that sauce is getting thicker.
Now I do have rice wine vinegar, but if somebody doesn't have that, what do you think they could sub? Like a apple cider or just a red wine?
So they could sub an apple cider vinegar. That would probably be a good substitute. They could also omit the vinegar and just at the end, if you have a lemon or a lime, just slice up some fresh lemon or lime and squeeze a little bit of that on.
Yeah, and actually lemon, well, this is turmeric, but turmeric and ginger are often used together, and ginger with lemon is pretty classic.
Yeah.
So I think lemon would be fantastic. Yes.
Either way.
And they're related, the two.
In the same family, that ginger and turmeric root. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, those weird root bulb looking thingies.
So if you guys can see on this close up where that sauce is really getting thicker.
Yeah, this looks great, April.
Thank you. Nice and colorful. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off.
You know, it is gorgeous in color on its own, but I was just thinking about adding like, oh.
Are you there, Angie?
I am.
Okay. You were such a tease. You were thinking about adding something to it.
A red bell pepper.
Yes, nice.
Yeah,
I'm
or
gonna add in the
yellow. I think yellow might look pretty as well.
Yes, absolutely. That would be great. So I just threw in that vinegar to kind of coat everything. I'm just giving it another toss. Okay. And then I'm going to grab one of my bowls here that has some of this pepper in it. There we go. Make sure you get that saucy goodness. Obviously, this is not a serving. It's not a portion. I'm going to eat more than this for my lunch. But there you go, you guys, on the close-up camera. And done in 30 minutes, the prep and all, cutting the chicken, cutting the asparagus. We're two minutes over because I started 2 minutes late.
This really has it all, April.
It's a magic recipe. Thank you, New York Times, for creating it. I can't even take credit for it.
Yes.
Any questions?
You found it. Thank you.
Yes. I don't want to keep people too long. We're kind of past time, but any questions for me before I let everybody go?
I don't see any other questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Next month, May, I forget the date right now, but May will be back in Lunch and Learn PowerPoint mode to talk about all of the health benefits of vitamin D. So join us for that. And then in June, I'm not set yet, but I think we're making dessert in June. I think we're using some fresh berries, maybe, some fresh fruit in June.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
I'll see you
April.
next time.
Bye-bye.